It is said that toys matter. There's a history behind black dolls. Little black girls had to wait for a doll that looks like me. History. It is not a given that little black girls have had dolls that look like them. In fact, it was nearly impossible to find a black doll when I was a child. That's why researching black dolls in America was so fascinating. This is the story. First, understand the importance of a little girl owning a baby doll. She names her and befriends her. She is a playmate that you take care of. She is yours, bonding early maternal feelings, the object of playful delight. As you will hear, they were important to the adults as well. When I grew up, I got a doll every Christmas until I was probably 10 years old. Never in that time did I receive a black doll. Why? There were none on the market. That's why, when I recently discovered a history of real black dolls made specifically for black children, not the collectible rag slave dolls we know about or the ones made in Europe, I wanted to share the news and history with you. I had never heard of Leo Moss, a black doll maker from the 1800s. Leo Moss was a Macon, Georgia native who worked as a handyman known as a jack of all trades. In addition to handiwork for the white community, Moss made custom dolls on commission for their children in trade for chickens and vegetables to feed his family. But his real joy was making black dolls for his family members. He scraped old wallpaper from walls, boiled it, and made a paste called papier-mâché. With this, he fashioned the faces of dolls in the images of his children and community members. Each head was molded individually and colored with a spray gun used for killing flies. Boot dye and stove blacking were used for the base color. The glass eyes were brown and inset into the heads. However, a few had painted eyes. Their hair was molded, and their nostrils were usually pierced. Bodies were cloth with legs and arms, mostly composition. The bodies were made by Leanne, his wife. Some body parts came from broken dolls that were given to them. Another source of doll parts was from a toy supplier, a white man from New York who sold seconds or defective parts to Moss. Moss made dolls in the late 1800s through the early 1900s. Friends and family who were contacted and interviewed said that they had been the subjects of his dolls, many of which bore sad faces with actual teardrops molded into their papier-mâché faces. Moss fashioned male and female dolls, children and adult. They were personalized and named Cleo, Minna, Peggy, Violet May. Legend has it that the tears were added to Moss's dolls after his wife, Leanne, ran away with the Caucasian toy maker from whom he purchased doll parts. Family claims that while a child sat long periods for the creation of a doll in its likeness and would begin to cry and could not be consoled, Mr. Moss added the tears to the doll's image. It is unknown how widely Mr. Moss's dolls were distributed around his community or elsewhere, but likely more local to friends and family. We know them because in the 1970s, Betty Formas, who became acquainted with Moss's daughter Ruby and a granddaughter Helen. They were in possession of his dolls when Ms. Formas visited their home and purchased over 30 of them. She is credited with unearthing them, and that acquisition brought the dolls to the attention of the doll collecting community. Leo Moss dolls are extremely rare and can sell for thousands at auction. It is believed that there are fewer than 100 around today. In 2005, at an auction in Annapolis, Maryland, a 16-inch doll attributed to Moss sold for $1,000. The auction house noted that the attribution was uncertain. Another 22-inch circa 1920 sold for $5,600. This doll had the letters LM on the shoulder and the text Lolita, 2 years old, 1920, written and hand-stitched on a tag on the torso, according to the auction description. It also contained this information. The child with tears is believed to have been a tribute to the young daughter of Moss. In 1984, a doll clinic in Toledo, Illinois, a man bought 2 dolls he had retrieved from the trash at an estate sale. They were Leo Moss dolls, worth at least $5,000 each. Moss would certainly have been surprised to know that in 2010, Rex, made in 1912, sold for a whopping $10,350. The dolls are beautiful and realistic. Find pictures of them by searching Leo Moss doll. Richard Henry Boyd, born Dick Gray in 1843, was a former slave who renamed himself Richard Henry Boyd after the Civil War. Boyd eventually became an entrepreneur and wore many hats throughout his life: preacher, missionary, publisher, banker, educator, writer, and black nationalist. He was also founder of the National Negro Doll Company. Boyd's company manufactured and distributed black dolls. He was the first Black American marketer of mass-produced black dolls to African American consumers. He initiated the Negro Doll Company after he tried to purchase dolls for his children but found none acceptable. Having been born a slave, Boyd understood the importance of image and self-worth. He rejected the stereotypical offerings of black rag dolls that he labeled disgraceful and humiliating. He wanted to market a toy that instilled racial pride and self-respect. Boyd turned to manufacturers in Germany that had revolutionized the use of unglazed porcelain or bisque to craft an array of darker-hued dolls. Sometime in 1907, Boyd convinced a German doll company to design several prototypes using this technique. According to one account, Boyd sent photos of black Americans to the manufacturer to ensure that they would truly convey the likeness of their black subjects. During this time, with the defeat of Reconstruction and the rise of Jim Crow, the new black elite challenged disenfranchisement, economic and sexual exploitation, and white supremacist violence in various ways, from militant direct action to black enterprise. But what united their efforts was their advocacy for race pride, especially among black children. To protect their children against the racist images of black people popularized after emancipation, Black American social reformers championed refined and intelligent black dolls as a means to teach black children, quote, that there is some pride, some merit, some worth, and something to be admired in dark skin, end quote. In July 1908, Boyd showcased the doll figurines at the Nashville Globe, his newspaper, where black Nashville residents, young and old, eagerly inspected the novel specimens. Orders for the dolls were immediate and sizable, so much so that Boyd decided to form a firm that could accommodate the orders in time for the Christmas season. By August 1908, the first advertisements for the Negro Doll Company appeared in the Globe. These toys, the advertisement proclaimed, represent the intelligent and refined Negro of today, rather than that type of toy that is usually given to children, and as a rule, used as a scarecrow. These dolls, Boyd explained, were to teach the people that they may teach their children how to look upon their people. I found an ad that was run in the National Baptist Publishing Board that announced in bold letters, "Dolls, dolls, Negro dolls. An opportunity is given to every Negro family to secure a beautiful Negro doll for their girls." 3 dolls are shown in the ad. They are lovely and dress beautifully. The dolls ranged in price from $1 for a 12-inch doll to $8.50 for a 36-inch doll. Little girls responded by sending their requests to Santa by way of the Globe paper. Dear Santa Claus, I am only 2 years old. I want a pretty doll, and I would like it to be from the Negro Doll Company, and a stove and some goodies, and don't forget Mama. Elsie B. Rivers. Little Elsie was not alone in her requests. She was among a number of black girls from across Tennessee who wrote to the African American biweekly newspaper asking Santa to bring them a Negro or colored doll for Christmas. And, like Elsie, they all preferred Santa to procure their dolls from the nation's premier black doll vendor, the National Negro Doll Company. Within weeks, the firm's renown skyrocketed. Orders streamed in from as far north as Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, as far west as Spokane, Washington, and as far south as all-black town, Mound Bayou, Mississippi. The Negro Doll Company dolls appeared at fairs and bazaars across the country. Endorsements from such distinguished black organizations as the National Baptist Convention and several chapters of the Federation of Colored Women's Clubs launched the NDC to national prominence. By the end of the 1908-1909 holiday season, the NDC had reportedly sold some 3,000 dolls. To reflect its widespread popularity, the company appended National to its name in late 1909. The National Negro Doll Company also adopted a new slogan to capture its mission, quote, Negro Dolls for Negro Children. With each Christmas season, the number of purchases increased, as did the variety of dolls and the NNDC's ever-expanding clientele. By 1912, a year after the company relocated manufacturing from Europe to Nashville to more easily meet demands, the company had sent dolls ranging in height from 12 inches to 36 inches to such extremes as Alaska, Canada, Mexico, Liberia, and Costa Rica. Given the expense of the dolls, approximately $24 to $200 in today money, the company offered black girls the opportunity to secure a free doll for Christmas in exchange for selling annual subscriptions to the Globe. Boyd phased out the NNDC in 1915. Scholars offer several explanations for this decision, including the onset of World War I, investment in more successful National Baptist Church Supply Company, and low profits. But by then, other doll companies had taken up the company's mission to provide black children a fitting plaything for the holidays. In the 1920s, Marcus Garvey and his Universal Negro Improvement Association urged black Americans to be proud of their distinctive color and features. By 1920, he had toured 38 states and touched the hearts of millions of urban blacks. His weekly newspaper, Negro World, sold 100,000 copies a week and promoted the sale of black dolls. A caption under a Negro World photograph of a happy child holding her black doll read, Little Thelma Miller, 8 years old, is very fond of her little colored doll. She has never had the opportunity and pleasure of playing with no other doll except a colored doll. I found references to a 1909 Negro Factories Corporation, a branch of the UNIA, to generate income and provide jobs for blacks that included a chain of grocery stores and restaurants, steam laundry, tailor shop, dressmaking shop, millinery store, publishing house, and a doll factory. However, I found no further information about doll making or pictures of dolls produced, but Garvey was quoted with this plea, Quote, "Mothers, give your children dolls that look like them to play with and cuddle." End quote. There is evidence that the UNIA endorsed the Harlem-based Berry and Ross Company, which became the first large-scale manufacturer and distributor of black dolls. Evelyn Berry and Victoria Ross, residents of Harlem, New York, were the founders of Berry and Ross Company in 1918. The company was completely owned and operated by minority black Americans. From the beginning, these women of business incorporated and began with a capital stock of $10,000, 2,000 shares at $5 each. The firm's purpose was the manufacturing, contract for, sale, and purchase of toys, shirts, shirtwaists, and other goods. The toy division produced black composition and military dolls. The dolls were of good quality, came in many sizes and styles, and sold for 25 cents to $15. They were called Berry's famous brown-skin dolls. To capture a wider market, the dolls were available in varied skin tones, including light brown, high brown, and mulatto. The dolls appealed to both black and white children and were sold in large department stores in New York City, Boston, Philadelphia, and others around the country. The company could not withstand the advent of the Depression and closed around 1929. Other than a picture of a doll in an advertisement for them, I found no images of Berry and Ross dolls. Researching black doll makers was most enlightening, considering that I was not aware of the making and distribution of quality black dolls that promoted racial pride during this period in American history. Have you ever heard of the Sara Lee doll? Me either. In 1951, when the Sara Lee colored or Negro doll hit the market, this historical doll created by Sarah Lee Creech, a white woman, would be the first play doll of its kind. It was designed specifically to be a quality doll with true-to-life black features. Not only does the Sara Lee doll possess a unique history of what sparked its creation, but its marketing campaign is also quite interesting. According to the book Florida Pathfinders, Sara Lee, after witnessing two little black girls playing with white dolls outside the Florida post office as they waited for their mother, wondered why these girls and others like them did not have quality dolls in their likeness. Therefore, in 1949, she launched a campaign to create anthropologically correct black dolls. Miss Creech initially conducted a one-woman mission to create the Sara Lee doll. Later, with the help of her friend, author Zora Neale Hurston, and several prominent community leaders locally, her mission was set in motion. She looked for support at the higher levels. She was graciously assisted by First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt's speech coach, Maxita von Hess, who persuaded Sheila Burlingame, a sculptor, to assist in the development of Sara Lee, a colored/Negro doll creation project. Miss Creech was probably aware of the 1930s and 1940s studies by child psychologists Kenneth and Mamie Clark with young black children and colored dolls. They found that black children often chose to play with the lighter dolls, suggesting that by the time they had reached nursery school, these youngsters had already accepted society's prejudices about their own race. The Clark's findings applied especially to black children attending segregated schools in the South, and these studies played an important role in the NAACP's battle in the 1950s to end segregation in public schools. Creech came to believe that a well-made doll that accurately reflected the beauty of African American children might help them overcome the self-rejection resulting from what one historian called a corrosive awareness of color. Armed with a small camera and a how-to book on portrait photography, Sarah Creech started taking pictures of black children, infants to 10 years of age. She took pictures of her friends' children and of migrant workers' children at the labor camps. In addition, she visited Belle Glade General Hospital and received permission from parents of newborn babies to take their children's picture from all angles. Creech took hundreds of pictures of local children and sent them to Burlingame as source material for plastic molds for the dolls. In addition, she took detailed head measurements of each child to ensure that the dolls would be anthropologically correct. She wanted the doll to be a composite of all these children photographed. The instructions given to Burlingame by Creech at the outset of the project was to, quote, capture in these children's heads the sweetness, the simplicity, and the natural dignity of the finest type of our colored children. Creech showed doll prototypes to novelist Zora Neale Hurston. Former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt took an interest in the project and wrote a letter in support, quote, I like them, the dolls, particularly because they can be made and sold on an equal basis with white dolls. There is nothing to be ashamed of. They are attractive and reproduce well with careful study of the anthropological background of the race. I think they are a lesson in equality for all children, and we will find that many a child will cherish a charming black doll as easily as it will a charming white doll, end quote. With the help of black leaders, including Ralph Bunche, Mary McLeod Bethune, and the presidents of Howard University and Morehouse College, Creech convinced the Ideal Toy Company to manufacture the dolls. She asked for guidance from leaders of the white community, too. Mrs. Roosevelt helped out a second time, hosting a tea in New York City for African American leaders and Ideal executives when the firm delayed production of the doll in 1951. News of the First Lady's reception and doll's availability appeared in Time, Newsweek, Life, Ebony, and Independent Woman, in addition to city and regional newspapers. The Sara Lee doll never sold in quantities that Creech, her supporters, or Ideal had hoped, in part because the vinyl used to make the doll hardened, lost its initial color, and seeped its dyes into the doll's clothing. Ideal canceled plans to make other African American dolls with a range of lighter and darker complexions, reflecting a similar range in the black population that might have broadened the doll's appeal. The toy world waited until 1968 before releasing another mass-market black doll, Barbie's friend Christy. Sara Lee dolls are a hot item on any collector's list. While reproductions have been made, the original doll in good condition is extremely rare. Ideal Sara Lee Negro doll, 1951 to 1953, was touted as, quote, an ambassador of goodwill, end quote, and sold for $5.99 and in some ads $6.95. After this project, Sara Lee Creech continued working for interracial harmony, establishing daycare centers in the 1950s and 1960s for the children of migrant workers and testifying before the White House Conference on Daycare in 1965. Her doll may not have become a commercial success, but as Gordon Patterson put it, quote, the creation of the Sara Lee doll said black children are to be taken seriously. It said that toys do matter, end quote. I end this story with the words of Zora Neale Hurston. She wrote, please allow me to say how pleased I am that you let me see pictures of the Negro dolls that you plan to put on the market. The thing that pleases me most was that you, a white girl, should have seen into our hearts so clearly and sought to meet our longing for understanding of us as we really are and not as some would have us, that you have not insulted us by a grotesque caricature of black children, but conceived something of real Negro beauty. Zora Neale Hurston. Now that's a real baby doll story. Pictures and advertising suffice for many of these dolls. It is worth the search to behold these outstanding contributions to lifting the beautiful faces of our children. Did you know that in 1950 a doll was produced of the first black man to play professional baseball in the United States, Mr. Jackie Robinson? The Jackie Robinson doll succeeded in setting toy market records in 1950. American history, with all her rich nuances of a people together.